Hello, everyone. As I have mentioned to you in the past, if you've joined us, I am a foster dog mom, and I'm really excited. I don't have Taco Pete with me. For those of you who have been doing group games, we have been putting up Taco Pete's picture. So I don't have Taco Pete, but I do have my latest foster dog. And this is Herbie. He looks a little bit like Taco Pete. He's a little bit older than Taco Pete. And he's right here in the Chicagoland area. Say hi. He says hi. And we rescued him, so he's learning his commands. If you happen to hear him in the background tonight, please excuse, he's learning his manners still. Well, Ashley, we're so excited to have you here. We actually have 70 students with us right now, and we are going to be getting in not only an overall idea of what you're going to be doing this week, but we thought you'd like some practice as well. So you're going to be with us for 90 minutes. That's 90 minutes of practice that you can then pat yourself on the back for at the end of today. And we're not going to leave anything out. We're even going to cover the essay. So to get us started, let's ask you a question. What's the difference between the SAT essay and the ACT essay? There's actually a couple differences, but this has to do with why we're going to be talking about it tonight and why we may not have mentioned it before. It is 30 minutes, Ashley. Good job. The ACT overall is much different. The ACT does have science. The ACT overall is shorter. Kathleen has got it. For the ACT essay, it's actually not required. Abby, I'm glad you mentioned more examples. You don't necessarily have to add in more examples, but you're certainly welcome to because you have an extra 5 minutes. Stephen, I love the way you said that. The ACT essay is actually really, really fun for educators to talk about because it actually talks about issues that have to do with what's going on in your school and your community. Oh, and yes, absolutely, Christopher, I asked for your opinion much, much more than the SAT. Christina, guesses don't count against you for the ACT. That's right. And Frederick, I'm so glad you know that. You must have seen quite a few prompts to pick that up. You are going to have a lot more information from the prompt itself. So it gives you a lot of information that you can then use for your essay. So we're going to be taking a look at one of the most helpful things we can do for you, which is an ACT essay template. We're actually going to show you the structure that you can use. Now, by we, I am not alone. I have two fabulous Grocket experts with me. I have Justin and I have Chad. For those of you who have joined us in the past, you may have seen one or both of them at any given time, and they're here to help answer your questions. If you have any questions, they're going to go right down in the Ask a Grocket Expert pod, and we will get to your questions as soon as possible. We do have quite a few students. We have 82 students at this point. So if you put in a question, it will be answered, just not instantaneously because we don't have robots helping us out. We have humans. So Jennifer, we are going to be looking at English, math, reading, science, and the essay. So really, we tried really hard not to leave anything out. Speaking of not leaving anything out, we want to make sure we offer as comprehensive a program as possible. And so these polls, which you can see the results are broadcasted, we want to make sure we cover them just real quickly. We're very interested to see how you're preparing. We want to be as helpful as possible. And so getting to know you as a test taker and as a student is super, super helpful. So for example, if you start at this poll right here, we see free videos, blog posts, and questions online. That is a lot of Grocket. We have YouTube videos, our blog is always free, and we are helping students out. I like to see that a lot of you are using books. A lot of students really like to pair Grocket with books because you can just stare at a book and study and sit down, but so much nicer to have something that's going to interact with you. So it's a really nice companion for books. And then if you have less than 2 hours per week to study, look at that, you're in the majority. So what we talk about is maximizing the time that you do have because you can't actually study 24 hours a day. And if you're scared, don't worry, we're here to reduce your stress and help you increase your score. If you are a 12th grader, then we understand you are taking the test hopefully for the very last time, perhaps for the first and last time. and we see that we have a whole bunch of different types of students. And that's what's really helpful about programs like Rocket. Anything that will actually adapt to you as you're practicing is super helpful, because then you don't have to do the analysis on your own. So today we're going to be talking about the types of techniques you're going to be using as you practice. I can tell you right now that you are not done with your practice. It's only Tuesday. We don't want you to wait till Friday, but we do want to leverage your time. We don't want you to be studying too much or too little. We want you to be like Goldilocks. We want it to be just right. Yeah, 6 hours every night's not going to be so helpful. Plus, what about all of your other homework? Speaking of other homework, go ahead and feel free to tell us what's the type of homework you're working on this week. And we know for sure you've actually got a ton of homework. Yeah, AP classes. Oh my gosh, Emily, 5 APs? I feel like when you get done with that, there should be a trophy or some sort of finish line. You run through and you break the tape at the finish line. Lots of APs. Soccer and band, yeah. So if you also have extracurriculars that you want to share, it's always nice to share and see what other people are doing. Feel free to write those in as we get started. I'm just going to give you a little overview, and getting to see what other students are doing and what they're preparing for is really helpful, because you know what? You're not in direct competition with anyone else here in this class. You are going for your own personal best on the ACT. So you see, we have students who are doing all sorts of different classes, different activities, but the thing that brings us together is we want to do our absolute best. So we have our top 3 tips for you. We are going to talk about English grammar rules. We're not going to go through everything, because you know what? We've been doing this for 8 weeks. Even if you're just joining us now, all those resources are still available. So we're going to be highlighting the things that are going to be most helpful for you in this final week before test day. And keep in mind, you are likely to take the test again if you're a junior. Math formulas are super important because on the SAT, they give you some, not all, but some formulas at the beginning of math sections. What about the ACT? So the SAT gives some formulas. What about math formulas for the ACT? Scott says no. What do we think? Frederick, really? Josie, Mike? No? Christopher's really sure. Ashley's sure. But you know what that means? That means that you can memorize them ahead of time. A lot of them actually you already know, like the area of a triangle. Many, many students know that one already. But this is a really big edge for you. Gain advantage over the competition by being prepared with your formulas. Don't be the student who's thinking, wait a second, what is the slope formula? What is it again? That's going to cost you time, and it's really going to affect your stress level. So be the student who goes in, walks in there prepared, and is ready for the math section. So actually, we're covering all of the formulas that you want to have memorized. Mike, great question. You can grab a calculator if you want to. We don't actually have anything that necessarily needs a calculator. In fact, the ACT is designed to not need a calculator. Even if you're taking the test on test day, it is super helpful to have one. But no, we have 5 math questions available today. We're going to talk about reading trap answers, because you know what winds up happening is you have a good idea of what the correct answer is, and then the trap answer talks you into picking it. It's kind of like the witch, come here, my pretty. We don't want you doing that. They look tempting, but no thank you. We want to stay away from those. Science terms, you're going to see how helpful that is. ACT essay template, we have a blog post too, and all of this is being recorded. So we're going to send out the recording by tomorrow morning so you can review all of it again. We want to make sure you know what to do in this final week before test day, and the more you know, the easier it is for you to think, okay, this test isn't going to eat me. It really, really isn't. And Ashley, I'm so glad that you mentioned that for math, if there is a super complex formula, like for, I'm trying to think, they'll even give it to you if it's a right cylinder. They'll give you the formula. So Ashley makes a fabulous point that if it's a super complicated one, then they will give it to you. In fact, the ACT is really student friendly. A lot of students have said to us over the years they prefer the ACT over the SAT because of how friendly it is. It's very, very predictable, and it doesn't go out of its way to trick you. So when you're thinking about the structure overall, you want to think about where your strengths are and where you're going to be thinking about all of your strategies and giving it your best. So a lot of students out of the ACT English and the ACT Math, they usually have a favorite. So tell us, out of those two pairings, English or Math, which one's your favorite? Because this actually affects your approach. And it looks like we've got maybe a little more Math. It looks about 50-50. Now this is what this means. If you have a favorite, that means that you're going to feel just generally a little bit better in that particular section. So let's say your favorite is Math. Then during the English section, think about how you just have to get through this and then you're going to get to Math. So use the way you're thinking about the test and the test structure to your advantage. If you prefer English, then enjoy that section. And once you're in Math, say, I just have to keep going until I get to the break. So leverage that to your advantage and do the same thing with reading and science. So go ahead and tell us now, out of reading and science, which one is your favorite? And most people don't like either one, but if you had to pick, which one's your favorite? Oh, you guys are already ready. That's awesome. So do the same thing. Think either, okay, I just have to get through this to my next section, or, oh, I'm going to really enjoy this while I have it, and then I'm going to get through it to my break. So think about how that could actually really affect how you're feeling in each of the sections. And believe it or not, the positive thinking that you can do really does make a difference. Maybe it's the difference between a 20 and a 22, or a 30 and a 32. But you know what? Those extra 2 points are going to make you feel that much better and are going to boost you up to that higher percentile. Now we have another question for you. What is your letter of the day? There's no wrong answer penalties, so you should have one already. And if you tell us Z, we're going to be very confused. Z is not an option. Mike, great question. Letter of the day is the letter you're going to pick if you're not sure about a question or if you want to put an answer down and then come back to it. Always have an answer choice ready. And Nathan's going for the whole alphabet. Make sure you have an answer choice ready. It actually will cut down. Maybe you will only save 2 minutes in a section, but for a section that may only be 35 minutes long, that's significant. Great question, Ashley. Our students ask us this all the time. Is there a letter that's better than any other letter? You know what? A lot of our students used to pick C and H as their letter. And for some reason, over the years, they've migrated more towards A and B and have been really happy with that. So if you aren't sure and you want to just go on what our students, and I've worked with over 4,000 students, they say nowadays the C and H is an okay choice, but they're really loving A and B. So that's just anecdotal evidence. We don't have any stats on it. Technically, there's not one that's better than another, but students always feel so much better when they hear, oh, you know, someone just took the test and they said A or B is really good. So all I can do is pass on the information that our test takers and many people who are now in college and or Kaplan teachers will say A and B. Yeah, when in doubt, pick A. You'll just feel that much better. And Jackson saying it's never A. Well, that actually could not possibly be true. We promise there are going to be answer choice A's that are correct. Speaking of correct, that's one thing you're looking for in the English section, but another thing you're looking for is concise. What does concise mean? Go ahead and tell us in the chat box, and that way we can use it to our advantage. We have 5 English questions for you to practice. Does it mean short, really? It really, really does. Simple, short, sweet, to the point. Few words as possible, Josie. Yes. Brief, Lisa. I love the way you said that. So this is the plan. As you read, if you find about that. He just got really excited. Herbie scared. Yes, I jumped too. I don't know if you saw it. I almost fell out of my chair. As I told you, Herbie is a rescue, and he's my foster dog right now. So we That won't happen on test day. What we were talking about was short. We're looking for something short and to the point. So if you notice that there is an error, then immediately go to the shortest answer choice and try to figure out if that one works. Now what's interesting is for the first one, that means that D should be the last thing that you look at. Another thing we want you to know is don't skip over sentences. Ashley, don't worry, the slides will be up by tomorrow morning. Yes, if you're writing stuff down and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't write all this down, it's not a problem. You're very welcome. So what answer choice again would be the last one that you consider? In question number 1, what's the last answer choice? Yeah, D is really long. It doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, but it's probably not correct. Given that the ACT puts a premium on short answer choices, then we know to be wary of any answer choices that are super long. Same thing with question number 3, answer choice B. Chances are that's probably not going to be the right answer. And if you remember that on test day, that can save you a bunch of time and possibly a headache. So we have answer choice C is correct for this one. Good job, way to start us off. This has to do with pronouns. We need the word who. Now, if you're wondering if it should be who or whom, then just substitute in the words he and him. He is the same thing as who, and him is whom. Also, for whom, with whom, by whom are really popular ways to say that. So if you hear that, then within the paragraph, then be on the lookout, because you would say for him, with him, by him. Sorry for the pause. Herbie was trying to eat a marker. Now that we have prevented mess everywhere, we are looking at question number 2. For question number 2, again, don't try to just skip to where it starts with the underline. Make sure you read at the very beginning of the sentence. And here is something, we're separating 2 independent clauses with a fan voice. We have a comma, but. So when you see that comma and then the word but, what has to be on either side of that? Are they each independent clauses, or is one independent, one's dependent? So do we have 2 independent clauses when you have a comma fan voice, or is it dependent independent? So you see a comma fan voice, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about, we have so many videos and blog posts over the last 8 weeks that can help you out with this grammar. Don't worry, and actually I'll be talking about it a little bit today. It is 2 independent clauses, exactly. So if you look at the word noticing, you have to make sure that that's an independent clause. So read through the last part of that sentence. Is that an independent clause? If it's not, it's wrong. And you need to find something that will fix it so it makes it an independent clause. A comma fan voice is the same thing as a semicolon, or as a period, just without the capitalization. So here, this one was really tough. Look, we didn't even get to 70% right. So mark this down on your paper. This one, I was telling you, the longest answer choice is generally not correct, but sometimes it is, especially in a case when you have a comma fan voice situation. So G is correct, comma and fan voice. Fan voice are for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So put them with a comma and it's the same thing as a semicolon. So write that down. Comma fan voice, same thing as a semicolon. Now we have question number 3. I cleared out the poll. Go ahead and vote for question number 3. This one's a great one. I love it. If you think it's wrong, then which answer choice do you go to first? If you think it's wrong for question number 3, where do you go first? You go to B, right? Because A, B, C, D, it's in alphabetical order. Is that how you do it? Question number 3, where do you go first if you think it's wrong? Steven says D. What do we think? Yeah, go to the shortest one first. And if it's correct, if it fixes the error, then you're done. You can check the other ones if you really, really want to. But if you found something that works, then keep it. So correct answer is answer choice D. So if you have any questions about, so for example, Joe, you were asking about question number 2. The reason why answer choice G is correct for question number 2 because you need to have an independent clause. Now, if you're asking about fanboys and you hear some of these concepts and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not sure, just let our Grokka experts know which concept you need, and they're going to be able to direct you to our YouTube channel, and then you can find what you need. We went over everything that you need on this test. I actually went through all 36 points in each section. I broke them down by content, and then you can just pick and choose which videos are going to be most helpful to you. I also posted blogs in case you want to read about them. Now we have 2 more questions, and then we're going to be finishing up this English section. So let's think about what is going to be most helpful for us on test day. We're going to read through, and we're going to remember, if we think it's wrong, we go to the shortest answer choice. What if we think it's right? Tell us in the chat box. What if you read it and you think, that's totally fine? Then circle it and go on. Pick it and move on. Yes, I love it. And you know what? Some students didn't realize until they started practicing that F or A, the no change option, can be correct. They thought there was always an error, and oh my goodness, they're missing out on so many points. So it is sometimes the case in which, and 92% of you said this is correct, yep, it's actually correct. And the one thing to keep in mind is there may be other answer choices that are also grammatically correct, but they're longer. Longer means not as good, and that means that they don't want you to pick that one. Now, question number 5 is a little bit trickier, and this is why we tell you not to skip around. Do not skip any sentences within the overall essay. So the reason why it's correct is because there aren't any issues with question number 4. You don't need a comma there because it's not separating an independent and it's not separating an independent and an independent clause. You can't have a reminder of the ways in which people and then the rest of the sentence. That's not a full sentence. And if you guys are looking at question number 3, here, let me show you. Question number 4 is down here. So there's no change for number 4. Yeah, and number 1 should be who? So once we answer question number 5, I'll go back to the previous slide. So go ahead and put in your answer for question number 5, and then I'll go back for you. Right, so we're not done with number 5 yet. So before I reveal the answer for this one, what is the author trying to tell us? Is the author trying to tell us that he speaks French really well? Or is he in French? Yeah. Is he trying to tell us he speaks French really well, or he tries to do the best he can with the little that he knows? Does he try to tell us that he knows it awesomely? And actually, Chad knows French really well. Our Grokka expert, Chad. Or he just tries to do the best. Yeah, he tries. So we're looking for something that has to do with he doesn't know it really well, but he tries to do it. And so for question number 5, the correct answer is going to be answer choice C. So, and that's true if you've ever been to a foreign country, or I used to live in Miami, so to my local grocery store, I would speak the little Spanish that I know. I said lo siento a lot, but with just a few words, you might be able to convey what you're talking about. So question number 4, the correct answer is F. Question number 5, the correct answer is C. But then if you're wondering about 1, 2, and 3, I'll go back for you. So 1, 2, and 3 are right here. So if anyone was looking at the slide and saying, wait a second, how is it no change? It was 1 is C, 2 is G, 3 is D, and then we had 4 is F, and 5 is C. So that concludes our English portion. We are going to talk about, well, in terms of practicing, we are going to talk about grammar rules in a little bit. But if you need some English help, if you need to practice or you're not even sure what your current score is, then that's what Grok is for. In 10 to 15 minutes, you can get a predicted English score. And then from there, we can tell you, okay, what should you be studying in this final week? We will go over the general grammar rules. So if you had questions about fan voice, I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. We're ready to move on to math. For math, one of the trickiest things is to remember to adjust your timing according to how hard questions are. But tell us in the chat box, where are the hardest questions? They're sprinkled throughout? They're just, you know, wherever is fine? Aha! They're at the end. And I like that people are saying that they're in the middle, because sometimes it seems like the middle questions are harder than the ones at the end. And they do like to sprinkle in a few easier ones towards the end to reward test takers who have gotten through that far and aren't just putting their letters of the day. But they are designed to get harder as you go along. So adjust your timing accordingly. For the first 20 questions, they should take you less than 20 minutes. And as you move through the section, step number 4 is super, super important to keep in mind. Because if you solve for X, and X is 3/4, and they ask for 1 over X, what are you going to put? So they want 1 over X, and you found X is 3/4. What are you going to put? Excellent job. It is the reciprocal, and you're going to put 4 over 3. Awesome work. And that's the thing, is you might not get your points because you know what? 3/4 is totally going to be an answer if you're not using this recommended approach. So let's put this into practice. Go ahead and read question number 1, and I'll clear out the poll for you. This particular question has a lot of wording. It has a pretty picture, but it's really abstract. What are 2 examples of points that have the same sign? Go ahead and tell us in the chat box. Can you give us examples of that? And go ahead and vote in the poll so that everybody can get a chance to answer. Jackson, great idea. I like 2, 2, and 2, -2. What other options do we have? So we have, I saw someone put in 3, 3, 1, 1. Yeah, there's a lot of different options. Love it. So what you are doing, what you're demonstrating right now is you are picking numbers. And I'm going to go ahead and draw where those would wind up being. And we've got a really high percentage on this one. So the question is, though, do you necessarily have to draw out these points, or can you just think about them in your head? So do you have to show your work, or can you just imagine it? You can just think about it. There are some students who prefer to write it out. I'm actually one of those students. You can imagine. Yes. So it's totally up to you. When you're working through the harder questions, actually writing stuff down can be super helpful. But if you have a question like this, you could just write the dots in. You don't necessarily have to. And those are not drawn to scale. Not on purpose, but just because I'm not great at drawing. So the correct answer is answer choice E, quadrants 1 and 3 only. The other ones would have mixed signs. So it'd be 4, -4, and -4, +4. So this is an example. What we're trying to demonstrate here is picking numbers. What we're trying to demonstrate here is if they give you a picture, that shouldn't be your final move. Take a look at this question and tell us, what would you do to this picture to amend it slightly? I like the idea of, I would skip it. That is one option, sure. That's always on the table. But tell us in the chat box, actually, what would you actually do? Would you skip it, or is there another technique you would have since it's the ACT and not the SAT? What's your plan? So if you looked at this and you thought, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing this, I might want to come back to it, would you just leave it blank on your answer sheet? Please no. Please put your letter of the day. X and X are actually the same size because this is a square. Can you tell us what the value of X is? And you can use Pythagorean theorem, or you can use 30, 60, 90 right triangles. Oh, I lied. Totally kidding. I meant 45, 45, 90. It's going to be 12 divided by the square root of 2. Don't worry, if you're not sure what I meant by 45, 45, 90, then I will be able to show it to you in a later slide. We'll talk about math formulas. Don't worry. We'll help you out. So here is, oh, and actually, if you're not sure how to do it, then just do Pythagorean theorem. So everyone should be familiar with the idea of Pythagorean theorem. If you haven't memorized it yet, have it ready for test day. You're going to wind up with 2x squared equals 144. You're going to divide both sides by 2, and you're going to wind up with x is equal to the square root of 72. That is the side of the square. The area of the square is side squared. So you have to take the square root of 72 and square it. Say that 10 times fast. You're actually just going to get 72. So what's really interesting about this is you didn't have to use any circle formulas whatsoever. There was nothing having to do with circles other than the fact that it's inside of a circle. But all you had to know is that a radius is half of the diameter, and then use that to your advantage. And you can use Pythagorean theorem, or you can use 45, 45, 90. And then you're done. So one thing to keep in mind is don't panic when you start to see something that looks super, super complicated. So a lot of people look at this and they think, oh, this was terrible. Never want to see anything like this. Get me out of here. And then you start working it and realize, oh, actually, I am going to survive. I don't have to hide under my desk. We don't recommend hiding under your desk, mostly because you can't see your test booklet from there. So question number 2, answer choice C, and we're done. So if you have questions about this particular question, you're going to be able to see this again in the recording. You can also ask our Grok experts now, but if you check out the other math videos we have online, it's going to give you a lot more foundation than this overview that we have here. So for example, question number 3 is about picking numbers. And if you've watched our videos before, you know that we don't recommend the numbers 0 and 1. What numbers would you like? If you're not picking 0 and 1, what are 3 numbers that would work really well? 2, 3, and 4. That's right. And they want to know what's the equivalent of AB, so A times B is going to give you 6. So you can plug in, and if you prefer to use algebra, no problem. We are not going to tell you not to do that. You want to use on test day what makes you comfortable. This is not the first test you've taken, we promise. Now for picking numbers, you technically do want to work through all of the answer choices, but for the sake of our presentation, we are happy to tell you that when you work through the rest of the answer choices, you're going to find that they do not work. And that answer choice A is in awesome. I blanked out. I was going to say apple, but I guess that's not very test day-like. A as in awesome. You're all done. So if you want to use algebra, 100% fine. If you want to use picking numbers, go for it. If you want to stand on your head and do it, sure, while you're practicing, just not during your actual test day. Aced it, that's right. Frank, good question. So if you wanted to do it algebraically, you just put this over 1, and then you cross off the C's, and you'd get A times B equals A times B. If you went through the rest of them, you'd get A squared equal times 1, which is just A squared. This one, you'd get A squared again. A lot of A squared. For D and E, you'd have to FOIL, which should indicate to you that you're not going to get A times B. So whether you're doing algebraically or you're picking numbers, then you can get to the right answer. And it really is a judgment call. The only way you're going to figure it out, though, is if you actually practice. So if you haven't tried Grok It out at all, we always have that 3-day free trial. So that will get you nearly to test day. We also have a 1-week option if you don't want to purchase for an entire month. If you're planning on only taking this final test date, then think about that as well. It's just that we want you to be able to track your progress as well. And Grok It, no matter how many questions or how few questions you do, will always give you a score prediction. So let us know if you have any questions about that as well. So we want you to go into your test feeling as good as possible. We really love the ACT. We so love the ACT. We can't even convey properly how much we love it. Now we promised 45, 45, 90 right triangles. And here we go. The way these work is they're proportional. Always the legs are going to be the same length, which I wish I could say for my own. My right leg is slightly longer. It's okay, doesn't slow me down. Don't even walk in circles. And then the hypotenuse is always at a ratio of x root 2. So x root 2, not given to you on test day, unlike the SAT, and you want to have this memorized. So just match it up. What answer choice reflects that particular pattern? It's just a pattern. Yes, Ashley, we're going to do that once we get to math formulas. And Justin's absolutely right. Not only are they time savers, but sometimes they're the only answer choices. Oh, and I apologize for not clearing out the poll. That was my fault. The correct answer is answer choice C. So if this one threw you for a loop, we're actually going to revisit it when we get to formulas. And Chad is helping us out. We love seeing our Grok It team come into action. And we're super, super silly and say that, you know, we're on the Grok It ship and we're ready for blast off and all those fun things. Now, speaking of silly, you are going to find, I'm going to tell you, on Saturday, if you see something like this, you're going to be so happy that you were here today. They love this type of question because most people haven't cracked it yet. They usually spend a lot of time on it, and sometimes they sneak it in the first 10 questions because technically it's not complicated, but when you look at it, it looks really scary. When they're talking about greatest common factor, just stack them and figure out what they have in common. So tell us how many x's they have in common and how many y's they have in common. So if you can list it out either in exponents or just tell us like 5 x's, 3 y's, tell us in the chat box. Is it 2 of each? It really looks like 2 of each. But it's actually just 1x and 2y. Yeah, just look at them as they're stacked together and you're going to have 1x and 2y. And that equals 48. So take 48 and break it down. And you wind up with, and you can break it down farther than that. And let me move this one because it doesn't look like a 12. There we go. So you can break this down farther, but given the fact that we have 2 y's and 1x, from there you can figure out which number is which. One of them is going to be a 3, and one of them is going to be a 4. And based on the pattern, oh my gosh, look at this. First time we've done this tonight. Awesome work here. That is fabulous. Super excited about that. We get a gold star for that. Nice work. Very nice. So even if you haven't seen the idea of greatest common factor before, excuse me, you can match up what they have in common. And they have 1x and 2 y's in common. Gold star, I'm really excited. I didn't think we would get 100% tonight. It's just we have a whole bunch of different types of students here. And I know it's hard to pay attention after you've been in school all day and probably even still have some homework left over. So this is really commendable. This is the type of thing that just makes us so excited to have you here. I'm really excited for you to feel it seems like it could be thought of as panic or anxiety. Think of it as energy. You've got a lot of energy going into the test and you want to use it to your advantage. In fact, some students find that they get their highest scores on test day because of the adrenaline that's going. So for this particular answer, we know it has to be 4 based on the pattern that we saw. We don't have to be greatest common factor experts. We don't have to be math experts. We do want to be ACT experts. It has to be 4 and not 3 because they're looking for y. There are 2 y's. There's only 1x. And we have a video that goes over LCM and GCM. Don't worry. We have just about everything you could possibly think of. Now for reading, this one's not going to take us very long because the biggest thing that we want to point out is knowing what's happening in the passage before you get to the questions is super important. You're not going to save yourself a lot of time if you read the questions first. There's just not a lot of time in general with this section. And if you read the questions first, you're actually going to find out that a lot of the questions are the ones you've seen before. They're detail questions. There are inference questions. So if you have your heart set on reading the questions first, we're not going to stop you, but we just really don't recommend it. We recommend instead passage maps. You can write down short, sweet, concise notes for each paragraph and have that make a huge difference. And we're going to show that to you now. We are going to put our points where our mouths are. We're going to show you how a good, strong passage map, and you can practice this before Saturday. That is the key to getting a great idea of what the answer could be. Then from there, once you predict your answer based on your map, we're going to talk about tonight avoiding traps because that's the next trick that you're going to be performing. Is first you're going to have a great prediction, and then for your next trick, you're going to avoid all of those landmines. And instead of falling in something, you are going to be looking for the correct answer and avoiding those traps. Now, Michael, you are right that mapping can take forever, but we're going to show you something really helpful. I bet you're going to like this. Helpful is good, right? Okay, so here's the thing. Humanities, natural sciences, and social studies. I said those out of order, I apologize. It's social studies, humanities, natural sciences. You are going to benefit from the structure of the passage. So what you're going to keep in mind is that the topic sentences and the conclusion sentences of your body paragraphs are super, super helpful. Now, if you had to pick out of all the paragraphs to read, if you could read only 2 paragraphs really thoroughly, what 2 paragraphs would you read? Would you read the middle paragraphs or would you read the intro and conclusion? Would you read the middle paragraphs? If someone said you can only read 2 really thoroughly, would you read the middle paragraphs? Now it's tempting to say the middle because you think it's like a sandwich. That's where all the good stuff is, right? But if you're saying intro and conclusion, you are correct. The intro and conclusion are going to be that much more helpful for your passage map and for answering the questions correctly. So if you didn't know that, then that's not a bad thing. That means those are points that you can pick up on because you're going to go a lot faster once you know that for those three types of passages, social studies, humanities, and natural sciences, intro and conclusion are going to be the most helpful. For your body paragraphs, look mostly at the first and last sentences, and then skim through the rest. If they need something really specific, they're going to give you a line reference, and they don't take away the passage. That would just be mean. You have the passage right there for you the entire time. So tell us to that again. It's, oh yeah, and Julia, you have to read all of prose. Sorry, but I can't fix that one. But we want to make sure you get this takeaway. What are the two paragraphs you're really going to concentrate on? So go ahead and repeat it back to us. We don't do this very often because you don't need to, parrot it back to us. But it's so important. We want to make sure that you heard us. Heard us, not hurt us. Yes, intro and conclusion. And Justin is absolutely right. Justin and I have worked together a lot, in fact, and we found that students try to do that with prose fiction, and it's not very successful because it's not written that way. So you know what? You can save prose fiction for last. It's often the hardest. Yeah, you really can't do it that way. Okay, so go ahead and read just the first paragraph. So I'm going to be quiet for a little while. Go ahead and read just the first paragraph. I want to let you know this is a humanities passage, and a lot of students really like humanities passages because they are really steady and stable. You can count on them to have really great structure. They generally pick kind of not the best topics, nothing that's going to be riveting, but also nothing that's too scary looking. So tell us, based on what you just read, what can you say about the narrator? You know for sure the narrator is, fill in the blank. The narrator is different from his family. And I apologize for the ringing in the background. I'll mute myself for a minute. Mention that he's Irish. That may come up. You're not sure, but if you picked up on that, that's really helpful. So the narrator is an artist from Ireland. If that's all you got from the first paragraph, you're actually doing pretty well. You don't want to put too much pressure on yourself. Let the questions guide you instead of the other way around. You're not sure exactly what they're going to ask, but you want to have a really good overall structure. Now, since this is an awesome presentation, we're actually going to fill in the middle paragraphs for you. I know you're really bummed that you can't do it all on your own. You're really sad, aren't you? So sad that we're just going to give you the middle stuff. Don't cry. Try not to cry. I know it's upsetting to not have to do all that work. Unfortunately, you can't take us with you on test day. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. the middle stuff going on. So we have parents wanted him to go to Dublin, but he doesn't feel at home in the city. And this is a passage on Crockett, so you could actually go and see it if you work through our reading passages. He works really hard at his craft. He paints to represent farm life. He has an artistic style that connects him to the land. So tell us in the chat box, how would an artistic style help someone connect to the land? Where does he wind up again? Where does the artist wind up going? He goes to the city, so it makes sense, and that's why we really like these passages. They have a flow that makes sense. Yeah, he goes to the city. He goes outside of the farm. Absolutely. So that's a concept that most people can understand, the idea of moving away from home and it not feeling as familiar. Read through the rest of our notes here, and then we're going to have you do the final paragraph. Because again, our first and our last paragraphs are the most important. Okay, go ahead and read the last paragraph. I'll go ahead and mute myself. Wondering what to do in middle paragraphs, you're paying attention to the first and last sentence of the middle paragraphs. So we want you to practice a few more reading comprehension passages. You can either do it on Crockett or using your red book or any other prep book that you have, but you're really focusing on the first and last paragraphs as well as the first and last sentences of each body paragraph. So what's nice is the final paragraph really does sum up what's happening here. Tell us in the chat box, what would you write for your note next to this paragraph? Because you want to write a note down to every single paragraph. And prose fiction is the one that's like a novel at the very beginning. He's not a conformist, Lynn. Good to hear from you. He paints what he sees. Ashley, I love that idea. Member of two intersecting spheres. Frank, he does feel different from other artists. Two different worlds, yes. And Julia, I'm glad you mentioned the idea of responsibility. He does try to express the farm. Parmveer, that's exactly right. Oh, Azana, I'm so glad to hear that. He feels like he has a commitment because if you think about where he's living now, he's in the city. He may meet other people similar to him, but nobody's exactly like him. I'm guessing very few people are from the potato farm and they had a family who said, okay, you're 14, out of here. It's the other side of himself. Yes, so what we have in our note, and we'll show it to you here, and you're already liking this method and you haven't even gotten points from it yet, so wait till you see the questions. We picked out questions from this passage. So taking a look at these notes, if you practice this every day until test day, so that's, you don't have to practice it tonight because you just learned it, but Wednesday, Thursday, do a teeny one on Friday, you're going to feel that much better on Saturday. So see if you can make that promise to yourself. It doesn't have to be an entire reading section, but do at least one passage. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, test day is going to be so much more of a success for you. And we're going to show you how. So you want to read the body paragraphs as well, but you're skimming them more than you would the intro and the conclusion. So we skipped over the body paragraphs just for timing's sake, and because the body paragraphs really you're just looking at the first and last sentences really carefully and skimming through the middle. First and last sentence per body paragraph. So tell us in the chat box, for the intro and conclusion, what are you supposed to do with those? Just first and last sentence? For the intro and conclusion paragraphs, you are reading all of it. Good. So read all of the first and last paragraph, the entire thing, don't skip anything, but for the body paragraphs, look for the first and last sentence. Yep, Reading fully, first and last paragraph. And you know what? This method is not only for you, it's also, we use it for our MCAT students. So people preparing to go to medical school, they use this because their timing is even tighter than yours is for the ACT. Reading, MCAT, verbal, oh my gosh, it's a sprint. So future doctors are using this. You know it's tried and true. And you know what? We were just talking about how he's teetering between two worlds. Question number 1 talks about that as well. So another thing to do is use the line reference to your advantage. It says lines 37 to 38. That's going to be paragraph number 2. So our prediction actually is from our passage map. How much more time does that save? So Warren says, you know what, I think it might be C or D. Now, I really like that you mentioned that. So if you're looking at answer choice D, let's look at it a little bit more closely because we're going to talk about traps in just a moment. It says his work in the pub and his work as a painter made him feel as if he lived in 2 different worlds. That's half correct. This is what we call a distortion. It's not all the way correct. If they had fixed the first part of the sentence to say what? He did work in the pub, but it's actually not what the problem was. It was on the farm. Yes! So answer choice D is only half correct. It can't be correct. For it to be a correct answer, it has to be all the way correct. So it has to be answer choice C, and you feel that much better about it. It has to be C because, especially, remember, you read that conclusion paragraph. It talked about how he felt he had a responsibility because he lived in the city, but he felt like he needed to represent those people on the farm. And if you've identified reading as not the best for you, don't think of it as a weakness. Think of it as an area of opportunity. Those are just points you haven't gotten yet. So if you start to think about it that way, it's going to make a difference in terms of how you feel about it. And think too, once you get through the reading section, you have science. So here we have, based on the information offered in lines 22 through 75, that's a big chunk of time here. Which of the following statements best describes the artist's early career? Now, all you have to go off of for today is our notes because you didn't read through the body paragraphs. But one thing you can see in our notes is that he devoted himself to painting, and I can tell you for sure he did work in a pub. Which answer choice seems the least realistic? Do people go and instantly find fame? Which answer choice seems the least realistic? I would say, I was thinking G, but J also looks really terrible. And then why can't we do answer choice H? What's wrong with H? He wasn't born there. What? He was born on the farm. Yes. So keep in mind that eliminating 3 rotten answers is the same thing as finding 1 right answer. And we love that. We love the fact that if you can throw some out, because sometimes you'll find a question and the wrong answer traps are so apparent, you can really tell that they're wrong answer traps, that really makes a difference for you. So correct answers, answer choice F. So even if you're not sure the answer choice F is right, what if you didn't remember he took a job at a pub? You do know the rest of them do not sound good. So don't second guess yourself. Go with your gut reaction. That's another thing is a lot of students change their answers. So here is breaking news for you. In most of the sections, go with your first answer. Don't change it. Math is the only section that you may find you missed a step. So for math, if you find that you're changing your answers, it's very possible you missed a step. For English and for reading especially, do not change your answers. Don't do it. I'm sure you've had something in the past that's gone wrong in terms of changing your answers. It's had to have happened to you before, and we see it all the time. Do not change your answer, especially in reading. For math, you may change your answer if you find a step, and science too, you might figure out you were looking at the wrong thing. But for reading, it is very rare that you would change your answer. For question number 3, you can get this from the map. I can tell you line 75 is line 71 is paragraph 5. Go ahead and find it in the map and type to us, what do the notes say? For paragraph 5, oh, let me clear out the poll for you. I get so excited I forget. For paragraph 5, what do the notes say? It's like we wrote the answer choice. And actually, to be honest, this map I did. I mean, I'm a test expert, so I have a good idea for maps. But that actually I wrote out, and then I saw question number 3. I was super excited. If you practice enough, so if this isn't your last test date and you plan to practice for more than a week, you'll find that you get so good at the maps that you match them up with answer choices, and it's very exciting. Yes, I did, Ashley. A lot of the test prep experts that you work with scored in the 95th percentile and above, and actually all the experts we have here scored in the 95th percentile and above. Because we really want to offer you absolute expertise. So there's not a part of this test that I say, oh, I don't really know how to do that. Nope, everything, all of it, totally know how to do it. I can't change a tire very well. And I'm not really all that coordinated. But when it comes to the ACT, I can tell you what you need to know. And SAT and GRE, and technically the GMAT too. But for this, question number 3, it really matches up well with our passage maps. We want you to practice every single day up to test day. It really will make a difference. Let's say you get just 2 more points in the reading section. That's 2 more points that go towards your composite score. Now, for science, we are going to take a look at 3 questions from science that really are grounded in the idea of figuring out what's happening in the experiment before you go to the questions. Oh, and if you wanted to check to see where everybody's located, go ahead and put not your home address, but your location in. So we know where everybody's hanging out. Wow, we got a lot of people in. We got some people over on the West Coast. Looks like we have mostly US students, some Canadian students. So if we were to plot all of the locations that we're seeing come up here in some sort of chart or graph, we wouldn't necessarily find a specific pattern. We might, but we don't know for sure. The 2 patterns that you're looking for on ACT Science are very specific. They're either going to be direct, inverse, or like we have in terms of locations here, there's going to be no correlation. So when we take a look at this particular passage we're going to look at, we're checking to see if there is a direct, an inverse, or no correlation type of pattern. And just read the intro information. It actually makes me laugh because I don't know who just wants to find stuff out like this. Go ahead and read just the first paragraph. What are the 2 things that she's testing? Go ahead and tell us in the chat box. And chat is fine, you silly goose. She's looking at solubility, and in particular, 2 things. Pressure and temperature. Now we're ready for experiment 1. Go ahead and read through experiment 1. and we're looking to label independent and dependent variables. It's not letting me click on it. I don't know if you guys can see I wrote independent equals what was changed. I'm asking Chad if he can help me. No. Okay, I'll try it again. I know you guys can hear me typing, but you couldn't actually see what it was. Okay. I really want to write this down. It's totally worth it, I promise. These are two terms, and we're going to go over them again tonight. Independent is what was changed. Dependent was what was measured. In this particular experiment, what's the independent variable? And Ashley, you know what? Losing focus is going to happen. But if you have these two things that you're always looking for and you're labeling, it actually makes it a lot easier to stay focused. Because if it's more of a passive activity and you're just sitting back and thinking, oh my goodness, it's not nearly as effective as looking for them. Good. So the temperature was changed. They changed it from 0 to 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And then what did they measure? They measured the solubility. No problem, Julia. So if you're always looking for independent, dependent, it's actually not as bad as just trying to read through it and think, oh my gosh, I'd never actually do this experiment on my own. The other thing too is it really helps you to compare activities. So go ahead and look at this activity and tell us what is the independent variable here. What's the independent variable for this activity? And then this way you actually get through the passages faster if you're always looking for independent, dependent. So we're looking for independent is the pressure. Yep. And once you write in what the independent is, tell us what the dependent one is. It's solubility again. So see how much easier it is to compare them, and you're going to find that the questions are that much easier. So just like with reading, we talked about passage mapping makes a difference. For science, always finding independent, dependent variable is going to make it go so much faster. I cannot even tell you how much better it is. It's just worlds of difference. Now, technically, another independent thing that they're doing is they're changing the different types of solutes. So you could add that in terms of independent. But the dependent variable remains the same among the two experiments. Yes, and Chad, you are absolutely right. Please do that. It is not for us. Well, you know, we don't gain anything out of it. It's for you. So we have question number 1, and I got to tell you, looking in the right spot, super helpful. You can use the power of your pencil to circle. Actually, I'm not sure if it's going to let me do it. To circle what you're looking for. You're looking for it to be tested at 25 degrees. So we have to figure out which, oh, good, it did. We have to figure out which experiment it is. And when you read through the intro information, we're looking at experiment 2. Now the problem is, I don't see 75. I see 750. I see 150. This is an excellent example of how they want you to know that the trends stay the same. So we need CO2, and we have 150. 150 is 20. 300 is about 40. So what do we do with that number 20? What would you do with the number 20? It's got to be less than 20, so answer choices C and D are out. You could try eating it, Billy. You're going to divide it by 2. The pattern stays the same. just cut it in half. So if you were thinking about it on a graph, it would be going down because you decrease the pressure, so you're decreasing the solubility. As you increase the pressure, you're increasing the solubility. So imagine if you hadn't labeled independent, dependent variable, and imagine if you hadn't realized that the patterns always stay the same. You can count on the patterns to continue. It would be a much harder question to answer. So the correct answer here, and 90% on our first science question, is very good. That is very good. I'm glad to see that. So for this one, the takeaway here is you want to know that the trends always continue, and we're actually going to do another question that helps you to remember that the patterns are really important. But before we do that, let's take a look again at experiment 1. And we have to figure out what is not a controlled factor. Well, I can tell you for sure, 2 things that are not controlled factors are the variables. So if you see an independent or a dependent variable listed in here, let me change the poll for you, then you know there's got to be something to that. It's not being controlled if they're actually manipulating it. That's they're doing a terrible job controlling it if they're changing it. The control cannot vary. So look for something that they either deliberately changed or deliberately measured. So what are 2 things in this experiment that they either changed or measured? What were those 2 things again? They did temperature and solubility. Yeah, so if there's one right there that's listed, you know for sure it's not a controlled factor. They were either changing it or they were measuring it, and those aren't controlled. Now another thing, and this one we're at a lower percentage correct here, because you know what they do? They're notorious for this. They don't mean to try to trick you. They're actually trying to reward test takers who know this, that if they mention something that has never been presented before, please don't pick it. Which answer choice presents something that really wasn't mentioned at all? What answer choice is sort of which one doesn't belong? Yeah, be really careful not to pick stuff. They're not trying to trick you. They're actually trying to, it's almost a freebie of, hey, look at this. This wasn't in the passage at all. Please don't pick me type of answer choice. Now, for pressure, they didn't change. For pressure, they didn't change pressure, so it's a controlled. Yes. So if it's not something within the experiment, then they're not going to be providing that as a correct answer. Now that's really tricky. So in terms of pressure, they didn't change pressure in experiment 1. I'm so glad that you brought that up. So Abby, you did such a great job. This is what we talk about, the power of your pencil. You can actually circle where you're supposed to be looking because there are trap answers. Answer choice G would totally have worked if it were experiment 2. Yeah, Billy, awesome work. It does say temperature in the table. Take a look. Temperature is being changed. So they're asking what is not a controlled factor. Temperature for sure is not controlled. They're increasing it. Every time they do it, they're making it bigger. So correct answer is J. Now our final question for science has to do with this idea of direct or inverse variation. So let's put up the chart from experiment 2. If there is a direct variation, then as one increases, the other one increases. Now, in terms of whether it's a solid or a gas, you're going to have to go back to the passage itself. But just tell us, based on direct versus inverse, what 2 answer choices are in the running for you? Is it A and C or B and D? A and C or B and D? So it should be B and D because as one goes up, the other one goes up, but let's go back to experiment 2 just to make sure we're working with solids, liquid, or gas. So the solvents were tested in either solid or liquid state. So let's go back to the options. So it's going to be, do you have that option? It's answer choice B, perfect. And for some reason, the slide isn't letting me give it a check mark, so we're gonna do. There we go. Yay! Okay, so if you're not sure what inverse and direct are, then it's actually coming up right now. So what we're going to do in our final 13 minutes, it's not going to take us very long because you can look at the video again. And actually, English grammar rules are already in the videos that I made. Math formulas are not in the videos, so we're going to pause, make sure we go through there. Reading trap answers are already there. Science terms are already in the videos, and ACT essay template is in a blog. So the only new thing really is math formulas, and those we're going to put up on the blog as well. So tell us, before we get started with our review, out of the first part of our presentation, what's the one thing that you know is going to be helpful for you on test day? Go ahead and tell us in the chat box. What is the one takeaway so far for you? Because it's different for everybody. So Mike, I'm glad to hear the reading's getting better. Scott, the mapping, it's such a difference. If you've never tried it, and I didn't used to do it when I was in high school. Pacing is super helpful. English, I'm glad that the English is getting better. Yes, Catherine, reading the intro and conclusion. A lot of students don't realize that that's where the bulk of information comes from. And Lisa just says everything. Science is a good one. Okay, so Jackson, you know what? We made videos for science. They won't actually take you long to watch, and they're completely worth it. So try to find time during the next couple of days to look at the area of opportunity that you know is going to be the best for you. So figure out, because you can't do, oh, and sorry about that. Okay, so our slides are working. I was wondering what was going on. Okay, so we want to go back to question number 3. Oh no, and the videos are on YouTube. I was wondering why my slide wasn't working. So the correct answer is D, but we really want to know why. Now the good thing is, the biggest takeaway from this one was immediately you wanted to know that it had to be direct versus inverse. So this is your first step here. It is D. So let's get rid of answer choices A and C. I got so excited that you got rid of A and C, and then the slide wasn't working. So we apologize for this oversight. But the biggest thing is, if you can get down to 2 answer choices, you have a 50-50 shot. You have to move really quickly through the science section. So if you get down to 50-50, then you know to put an answer choice down. If you have a little extra time, then definitely look through it some more, but don't take too much time on any one question. Now here's the tricky part. It's in the little itty bitty, take a look. That one says S, CO2 says G. Who would have even looked there? You have to look in the itty teeny bitty part of it. So tricky, right? How is that for a wow moment? So in addition to using the power of your pencil to circle experiment 2, get rid of the 2 answer choices that you know are wrong. And then, who would have thought? So answer choice B is really, really tempting, and that's why because I knew there were solids within it, but I didn't double check. Don't do that on test day. What a great moment to have here working together to look at those teeny tiny little letters. And no, see, they're trying to reward test takers who have prepared ahead of time, who have come to these types of events, who have studied, and who look for the teeny tiny little details. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? So yeah, that's you. So get these points. But really, what I was most excited about was that we had narrowed down those 2 wrong answer choices, and then from there, just look for the teeny tiny bits and pieces. You seriously will never forget this. Okay, now that that is the conclusion of all of our practice questions. Now what we're going to talk about is just overall rules and some formulas. So we're winding down. If you're getting a little bit tired or you have other homework to do, now would be the time. If you have to go and do something else, that's totally fine with us. We just wanted to make sure you got in as much practice as possible. If you want to stick around with us, we're going to be reviewing things that you likely have already seen or already know. So if you want to head out, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to stick around, that's absolutely fine too. So we have English grammar rules to start off with, and what we're doing is we're highlighting 10 points out of the 36 that students ask us about the most. We couldn't fit all 36 in, and we didn't really want to because we don't want to overload your brain. What we do want you to know is how to use commas, and if you find a comma somewhere that doesn't have a specific rule, please get rid of it. Say, excuse me, but you don't have a specific job, so you can't be here if you wanted to. But really what you're looking for is if there are items in a list, if there's a positive, which is non-essential information, if you have an introductory phrase, if you have a comma and a fan voice, or if you're separating independent and independent. Those are the only 5 ways you're going to use it. That's it. There's nothing else. So for the commas, these are the 5 rules. And if you had any we had a technical glitch, but we're good. I think we're good now. Okay, so Ashley, when do you use comma before the word and? Awesome. Awesome question. So I like cake and I like ice cream. Okay, so you don't use a comma when it is not a separate sentence. So I like cake as its own sentence. I like ice cream as its own sentence. That's when you'd use a comma. When it's not its own sentence, ice cream is not its own sentence. It's delicious, but it's totally not its own sentence. So that's the difference. And we have all those YouTube videos. For dashes, these are a little bit weird. Dashes are pretty much chameleons. And you just want to make sure that they're matched up with each other. So you wouldn't have a dash and a comma. You'd either have 2 dashes or 2 commas. You can also use a dash like a semicolon almost. So dashes generally are not incorrect. They're usually fine unless they're mismatched with commas. Other than that, they're usually absolutely fine. And then for apostrophes, just make sure that it makes sense. And so the puppy's floppy ears are adorable. I mean, of course, the puppy's floppy ears are adorable. And the puppy owns those ears versus the puppy cannot stop wiggling. And we have about 5 minutes left, so we're going to finish up with our grammar rules and we're going to show you our math awesomeness. I do want to skip over to are semicolons and colons, and this will be the last grammar rule that we do. So because all these are in videos already, this isn't anything new that you can't access. For semicolons, the only thing that I think you may not have anticipated if you haven't been practicing is just that it can be used to separate really long lists. So it's kind of like using a bracket when you're doing math. If you have a lot of parentheses in math, you might use a bracket to sort of put on the edges. Fanboys are the words for, and, more, or, but, yet, and so. When you put those with a comma, they separate independent clauses. So you could say, I like cake and I like ice cream, or I like cake but I don't like ice cream, which doesn't make any sense. They go together. And then for a colon, those are really just, they're similar to dashes. They set off a phrase or an explanation. They are not semicolons. Colons and semicolons are not interchangeable. Now, in terms of math, again, you are not going to have these available to you on test day. They're going to be in your head. So starting off with average. Average is different than average speed. So if you haven't practiced any average speed questions yet and you're worried about remembering how to do them if you haven't done them in a while, if you go on Grokkit and go to custom practice, you can actually pick out average speed questions and do a couple in a row. So if there's anything that's come up today and you think, you know what, I don't know that I know how to do that very well, you can actually go and customize specifically what you want to be studying. In your red book, if you want to thumb through it and try to find it, that's fine too. But you really want to be looking at those things that you're feeling a little bit unsure about now instead of on Friday night. Mode and median don't come up a lot, but they're really good to know. You might see one question on them. Probability, however, is going to come up in more than one question. And you really want to remember that it's the number of desired outcomes over the number of total outcomes. We are going to put this entire recording on YouTube, and these comments are recorded and put on YouTube. So for part over whole in terms of percent, this is one way to write it. If you wanted to practice percent questions, we did those in the first week for Grokkit. So week 1 math, that's where you're going to find those if you want to practice them. For distance, midpoint, and slope, these are must memorize formulas. Must memorize formulas right here, because for coordinate geometry, that is going to be 6 points, and for plane geometry, that is 7 points. I may have those interchanged. I just know that altogether 13 points for plane geometry and coordinate geometry, so that's a big deal. The other thing you want to keep in mind is when you're working with transversals like this right here, that is going to be, if you have one angle, you can find basically 7 other ones. So another thing that we can do, especially since we're getting down to the wire here, what I'll do is I'll put together a separate video with the math formulas so that you can just easily watch those. So I'll go to the next slide. You don't have to furiously write these down. I'll do a separate video with a few examples. So we'll post that by tomorrow evening. We'll do the math formulas video. That's one that's highly requested. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I kind of need to go through these, then we are going to post this to YouTube by tomorrow night. Again, formulas in terms of circles, if you haven't seen them in a while, you're going to want to review them, but I want to do them a little bit more thoroughly, and the best way to do that is going to be with a YouTube video. And actually, those YouTube videos were developed from student requests. Students love to be able to watch something in particular, be able to find it on YouTube, and actually the second most popular search engine, second to Google, is YouTube. So again, some more math formulas, but we're going to put together a video for that. Now, if you're looking for the ACT essay help, that's in a blog post. But we do want to make sure you know what to do the night before. So we have a few more things that we're going to be putting up on regarding test day onto YouTube. They don't give you any formulas on the test. And actually, I can go back to the slide at the very end. Don't worry. I'm just going to go through the night before and the thinking positive slide, and then I'll go back to the formulas. So for those of you who are looking to get out of here right away, I just want to remind you to pack your bag ahead of time and to know where you're going. Also, make sure you set more than one alarm. And then staying positive, actually want to wake up your brain ahead of time. So read something. It can be ESPN.com if you want it to be, or New York Times, or the back of the cereal box. Make sure your brain is awake before you start on your first question. Make sure you think about everything you already know and the things that you learned here tonight. And then knowing that you get a reward after the test, right away after the test is really helpful. So whether you want to go out to a movie or you want to take a nap, something that's really, really helpful is knowing that you're going to be rewarded right afterwards. And then don't forget to think good thoughts. This is the official conclusion of tonight. We're going to go back to a few other slides. We're going to put a few more things on YouTube for you. We'll stay in touch through email, on our blog, and of course on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming, and let us know what slides you'd like us to go back to. I think that we had some requests for the math formulas.